there is a sentence, just one, that when spoken with clarity and power can unmask the masquerade, strip the illusion, and send a narcissist stumbling into the shadows of their own creation. There is a moment in every silent soul when the hush becomes unbearable, when the quiet turns heavy, like rain pressing on a roof long ignored. That is the moment your spirit begins to stir, the moment when something deep and ancient within you starts to whisper, "This is not love, this is not freedom, this is not you." And though the whisper may tremble, it holds the seed of thunder. That whisper is recognition, and it is the first trembling note in the long, triumphant song of your power. You do not rise all at once. Power does not come like a storm, it comes like a sunrise. Soft at first, slow to warm the bones, but it comes. It begins not in your fists, not in your voice, but in your eyes. When you begin to see things as they are, not as you've been told to see them, not as you've prayed for them to be. When the veil of hope you wore like a bandage slips and your vision clears, even just for a second, that is the beginning. Recognition is not always loud. It is the still moment when a smile that once thrilled you now feels hollow. When a compliment that used to keep you tethered now lands like a rehearsed line in a tired play. When the person you once protected with your silence becomes the very source of your shrinking, you begin to see. And that seeing, that quiet dawning of truth, is what the narcissist fears most. Because once you see, truly see, you cannot unsee. And what do you see? You see the patterns, the sweet talk followed by sabotage, the praise followed by punishment. You see the turning of tables, the shifting of blame, the way your light has been used to cast their shadow. You see how your kindness was currency, your empathy a tool in someone else's toolbox. You recognize how many times you said yes when your soul begged you to say no, how many times you apologized just to keep the air from shattering. But recognition is not just about seeing them. It is about seeing you, seeing the way your spirit bent and folded to fit into a mold that was never shaped for your truth. Seeing the way you have dimmed and dulled, shrunk and silenced, for the comfort of someone who would not shrink or silence for you. Recognition does not come to condemn you, it comes to crown you, to remind you that what you thought was weakness was actually wisdom wrapped in survival, that your endurance was not naivety, it was hope wearing tired shoes. And with recognition comes reclaiming. You begin to take your name back. You begin to take your no back. You begin to gather the parts of yourself you abandoned at the altar of someone else's need. And as you gather, you grow, not in vengeance, but in reverence. Reverence for the woman or man you used to be, the one who didn't know, the one who tried, the one who stayed longer than they should have, not out of foolishness, but out of faith. And you hold that version of yourself with love, not shame, because they were doing the best they could with the light they had at the time. Power begins with recognition because recognition is the unbinding. It is the untangling of your identity from their narrative. It is the moment you stop trying to fix what was designed to keep you broken. It is the moment you realize you were never too much. You were simply in a space too small. And the minute you recognize your truth is the minute your chains start to loosen. Not because they fall off all at once, but because you no longer polish them. You no longer justify them. You no longer wear them as jewelry. You begin to see them for what they are, and suddenly they begin to rust. Power does not arrive as thunder. It arrives as clarity. It arrives as breath. It arrives as the rising in your chest when you finally say, I deserve better. And believe it, not just with your mind, but with your marrow. Recognition is the doorway. Walk through it, barefoot and brave, not because you have all the answers, but because you finally have the right question. What if I never needed to be broken to be loved? That question will call your spirit back to the table, and where your spirit returns, your power begins to rise. It rises with each truth you speak, with each boundary you build, with each silent moment you refuse to fill with explanation. It rises not because you are becoming someone new, but because you are finally returning to the person you were before the world convinced you to forget yourself. It rises from the recognition that you were always worthy, always enough, always sacred, even in your silence, even in your sorrow, even in the middle of a story that tried to erase your name. A narcissist does not tremble at your anger. They do not flinch when you shout. They are not undone by the bitterness that bubbles up in your voice when you finally name the pain. No, what makes a narcissist nervous is not hatred. It is the calm, steady light of exposure. Because rage, you see, they can twist. They can claim you are emotional, unstable, irrational. They'll say you're too sensitive, too dramatic, too broken to see clearly. But exposure, that's a mirror they cannot fog with lies. Hatred is something they can manage. They will wear it like a crown of thorns and call themselves the victim. They will turn your pain into their proof and your resistance into evidence of your supposed cruelty. Hatred still feeds their story. It still says, I matter enough to be the center of your world, even if that world is burning. But exposure doesn't scream. Exposure doesn't explain. It simply illuminates. It holds the lantern high and says, without trembling, I see you. And oh, how that terrifies them. Because exposure requires no performance. It's not interested in drama. It's not looking to win. Exposure doesn't need a crowd. It doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be believed by others. It only needs to be real. And once realness arrives, the game begins to fall apart. The strategies, the manipulation, the mask, they all begin to disintegrate in the face of someone who is no longer reacting, no longer defending, no longer explaining who they are to someone who never cared to understand. A narcissist does not fear being hated. They fear being seen. Seen not through the eyes of anger, but through the quiet lens of truth. When you stop trying to convince them, when you stop hoping they'll change, when you stop offering them your stage and start walking off of theirs, that's when fear sets in, not your fear, theirs. Because now you hold power they can't touch. Now you're standing in clarity. You are no longer wrapped up in their chaos, in their web of confusion, in their cycle of praise and punishment. You are no longer looking at them through the eyes of the wounded child in you who just wanted to be loved. You're looking at them as they are, and you are not flinching. You are not yelling. You are not running. You are standing. Narcissists fear exposure because it unravels the illusion, it strips the costume, it cancels the performance, it tells the truth without apology and without malice, just truth. And truth, especially when spoken softly, when spoken calmly, when spoken with stillness, it is unmovable. It cannot be bribed, cannot be bullied, cannot be made to vanish with guilt or seduction or shame. And when you become the truth teller of your own story, when you stop participating in the script they wrote for you, they lose something they never thought you'd take back, your gaze, your energy, your belief. They lose the version of you that needed their validation. They lose the character you played so well in the story that always revolved around them. Now, you're not in the audience, you're not backstage, you've left the theater altogether. To be exposed is to be revealed without armor, without excuse, without pretense. And that, beloved, is the one thing a narcissist cannot stand. Because to be seen means to be known. And to be known means the game is up. It means they cannot hide behind the charm or the sob story or the carefully crafted image they fed to the world. It means they must face the reality of who they are when no one else is clapping, when no one else is playing along. And they are not ready for that. They are not built for that, because the narcissist needs the fog, needs the noise, needs the chase. They survive in the shadows of misunderstanding, in the echo chamber of admiration. What they fear is your clarity, your neutrality, your quiet refusal to pretend anymore. What they fear is that you have finally looked them in the eye and seen through every single lie they ever told about who they were and who you had to be to stay in their orbit. There is a sentence that does not rise with rage, does not crack with pain, does not lean on insult or scream for validation. It does not beg to be heard. It does not strive to be believed. It walks in calm and upright, like a woman who knows her name and no longer flinches when it's not spoken with honor. This sentence is not a weapon, it is a revelation. And when spoken to a narcissist, it does not slice the air with anger. It clears the smoke of illusion. It says simply, I know who you are. That's it. No punctuation, no performance, just those 6 words held like a mirror, steady, still, and full of light. It is not the length of the sentence that carries weight. It is the lineage of all that it reveals, because within that small utterance lies the unraveling of every mask they've ever worn. The moment those words fall from your lips, the game changes, the veil slips, the curtain rises. You are no longer a character in their show. You are the audience who has stood up mid-act and said, I see the strings, I see the script, I see the story, and I no longer believe it. You see, a narcissist builds themselves through illusion. Image is everything. Control is necessary. The manipulation, the charm, the carefully placed praise, it is all a means of keeping you blind. They thrive not on love, but on confusion. They don't need you to adore them. They need you to question yourself. They feed on doubt, your doubt in your memory, your instincts, your worth. So long as you are wondering if maybe it's you, they are winning. But the moment you say, I know who you are, the fog lifts, and they know it. That sentence is not an accusation. It is not a threat. It is an awakening. It is the voice of a soul that has returned to its rightful place at the center of its own life. It is a declaration that says, I will no longer hand you the paintbrush to rewrite the canvas of who I am. And because it is said not in malice but in truth, it is irrefutable. It leaves no opening for distortion, no path for counterattack, no door for denial. It just stands, strong, silent, sufficient. They cannot argue with it. They cannot charm their way around it. They cannot silence it with guilt or bait it with praise, because that sentence is a boundary, a living, breathing line that they cannot cross. Not because you shouted it, but because you believe it. And belief, real belief, cannot be undone by manipulation. It cannot be shaken by gaslight or drowned in tears that are shed too late and too strategically. I know who you are is the moment you stop looking at their potential and start seeing their patterns. It is the second your vision stops being blurred by hope and starts being anchored in history. It is when you take the evidence, the late-night questions, the quiet aching, the parts of yourself you've edited down to be palatable, and you gather them all in your hands like sacred stones and say, this is enough. Not too much, not too little, but enough to never go blind again. They may laugh when you say it. They may dismiss it, wave it off like dust in the air, but behind their eyes something shifts, because those words mean the spell is broken. The illusion no longer works on you. They have been seen not as the performer, but as the architect of the performance. And that is what they cannot survive. Not your distance, not your disapproval, but your discernment. I know who you are is the key that turns in the lock of your silence. It is the sentence that doesn't beg for apology or even understanding. It doesn't need them to confess, to weep, to change. It doesn't seek transformation from the one who wounded. It is the transformation of the one who was wounded. It is not spoken for them. It is spoken for you. Spoken so your soul can step into its own light without fear that the shadow will ever pull it back again. Spoken so your feet remember how to stand, how to walk, how to leave, how to belong once more to the one place they were always meant to be, home, inside yourself. There is a silence louder than any scream, a stillness more powerful than any resistance. It is not born of fear, not carved from resignation, but sculpted carefully by a spirit that has had enough. This silence is indifference, not coldness, not cruelty, but a deliberate withdrawal of attention, of energy, of the oxygen that once kept a narcissist's illusion alive. Indifference is not a wall built in haste. It is a boundary formed in wisdom, and it is the very thing that cracks the foundation of everything a narcissist depends on. You see, a narcissist thrives on reaction. They are not simply seeking love, they are seeking supply. That supply can come dressed in praise or cloaked in rage. It can be your admiration or your anguish, your affection or your fury. As long as your gaze is fixed on them, as long as your thoughts revolve around them, they are fed. Their hunger is not particular. They do not care if your emotions are sweet or bitter, only that they are stirred by them, that you are dancing to their rhythm, whether joyful or broken. But indifference changes the music. Indifference refuses to dance. It does not argue, it does not plead, it does not try to correct the lies or rescue the story. It simply steps away from the stage, folds its hands, and watches as the spotlight dims. And that, more than any confrontation, is what begins to undo them. Because indifference says, I am no longer available for your performance. It says, my peace is more precious than your approval. My silence is not weakness, it is wisdom. I am not punishing you, I am prioritizing me. And there is no script for that. The narcissist knows how to counter your rage. They know how to manipulate your compassion, but they do not know what to do with your neutrality. They do not know how to fight against your freedom. Indifference is not dismissiveness. It is not pretending you were never hurt. It is not shrinking down or closing up. It is opening your hands and releasing the need to be understood by someone who never wanted to understand. It is the gentle turning of your soul away from chaos and toward clarity, toward healing, toward rest. There was a time you gave everything, your explanations, your defenses, your justifications, your hope. You tried to fix what you didn't break. You tried to prove what didn't need proving. You stood in storms you didn't summon, hoping that love could survive the winds. And when it didn't, you still stayed, thinking that maybe, just maybe, if you loved harder, they would finally see you, finally choose you, finally change. But indifference is the quiet knowing that they never saw the real you, that their love was always a reflection of their need, not your worth, that the version of you they claimed to love was never truly you, but the mirror you held up to make them feel whole. When that mirror cracks, they do not see your pain, they only see their loss of control. And so when you rise, not in revenge, but in restoration, when you withdraw your light from their theater and place it gently back on your own path, they feel it. They feel the absence of your energy like a house feels the absence of warmth when the fire goes out. They feel the emptiness where your devotion once lived. They feel the void of no longer being the center of your universe. And that emptiness terrifies them more than your wrath ever could. Because indifference says, you are no longer the sun I orbit. You are no longer the story I tell myself at night. It says, I don't need you to validate me. I don't need you to notice me. I don't need you at all. And for someone who has built their identity on the control of others, that is the greatest undoing. Indifference cannot be manipulated. It cannot be seduced back into place. It cannot be baited into battle. It is the final form of self-respect, not forged in bitterness, but in liberation. It is the moment you realize your value never needed to be proven to the one who constantly tried to erase it. It is the realization that your silence is not empty. It is sacred. It is the sanctuary where you no longer perform, no longer explain, no longer suffer to be seen. It is the moment when your energy returns to its rightful owner, you. And without it, the narcissist finds themselves staring into the quiet for the first time, and the quiet does not reflect their greatness. It reflects their hollowness. It reflects their dependence on attention, on admiration, on chaos, and it offers none of it. It simply reflects back their own image, stripped of the illusion, and asks the one question they cannot bear to face. Who are you when no one is watching? There is a place in the soul where the wind does not rattle, where no storm can reach, where the clamor of judgment, betrayal, and noise falls silent before it touches your spirit. That place is not built overnight. It is carved moment by moment through fire and fracture, through prayer and patience, until one day you no longer flinch at the thunder. You no longer tremble under the opinions of small minds. You no longer reach for the approval that was never truly yours. You sit instead calm and unshaken, not because you have no pain, but because you have chosen to no longer bleed for unworthy causes. To stand in stillness is not to be blind or unaware. It is to be so thoroughly aware that you no longer participate in every foolish invitation to chaos. It is to understand that everything does not deserve your voice, your attention, your emotion. It is not ignorance. It is wisdom. It is not passivity. It is precision. The power to choose your peace again and again, no matter how loud the world tries to become. There will be those who try to interpret your stillness as weakness, who assume that your lack of reaction is indifference or fear, but you know better. You have learned that not every truth needs to be shouted to be honored, that not every insult needs to be answered to be dismissed, that not every battle needs to be fought to be won. The person who has tasted deep pain and learned to sit with it, to breathe with it, and still not become it, that person has discovered a power no narcissist, no critic, no manipulator can reach. Unbothered knowing is not a mask. It is not a show of strength you put on for others. It is a knowing that exists in the marrow. It is the way your soul says, I am not what they did to me. It is the way your heart whispers, I no longer bend for broken people to feel tall. And so you stand. You do not chase after the ones who left you wondering. You do not crumble when they rewrite the truth to suit their weakness. You do not lose sleep over the ones who only ever saw your shine as competition. You let them talk, you let them spin, and you return to your stillness. Stillness is the answer to noise. It does not beg to be understood. It does not explain its presence. It simply is. And in that being, it terrifies those who need your reaction to feel real. Because when you no longer dance to their dysfunction, when your silence no longer hides fear but glows with quiet confidence, they see it. They see that you are no longer